family's four-legged members.
Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on 1110 a.m., 96.7 FM, 98.7 FM, and 96.5 West Side.
Aloha, and welcome to Capital Connection with your host, Senator Angus McKelvey. I'm your moderator, Tom Blackburn Rodriguez. It's my job to speak over the music. Good morning, everyone. We're going to have a great guest today. Our guest today is Carson Rynd, and he is Microsoft's Director Specialist of AI. And he's going to talk to us about everything we want to know about artificial intelligence and also maybe talk about some security issues as well. And now your host of Capital Connection, Senator Angus McKelvey.
Aloha, everybody. Aloha, Tom. Thanks for joining us today on this Wednesday.
And good morning, Senator. How is your morning going? It's pretty early right now.
Yeah, always is when we start the show.
Now, of course, I always want to ask you, have you had your coffee?
I did. I got torn ligaments in my knee, so it's getting around to getting coffee a little earlier. Harder this morning. So
Getting a little rough there on the Senate floor, Senator.
No, it's just an injury from behind the side. Just got worse and worse over the week. But, toil on, right?
Well, take care of it. Take some Tylenol.
Nah, no such thing. Anyway, you're funny though, Tom. That's hilarious.
I know. I live on sumo dogs and Tylenol. But, Senator, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. One of the things that's come down is Governor's Message 583. What is that?
Well, Governor's Message 583 is one of the many governor's messages that is sent down during to the legislature, and this has to do with nominations for boards and commissions. And there are a lot of boards and commissions, even though they operate at the state level, we still need good people to step up and serve on them because many of these boards and commissions call for neighbor island representation. And without the actual people to step in and fill these positions, we don't have any neighbor island representation. So one of our own constituents was named to the Gaming Commission. That was the head of what was the message. They go once the message is received, we'll schedule a confirmation hearing, which we did for him and the other nominees. And then after the hearing and testimony is received, we'll make a recommendation to the floor whether to advise and consent or not. And so we're happy to say that we advise and consent on that message, and so we have a great person from Kihei able to serve us on the Game Commission, which is the commission that was set up to have hunters advise landowners in the state on game management issues, especially, and it was part of the hearing, axis deer.
Excellent.
So
is that was that Michael Johnson of Kihei got that nomination?
Mm-hmm. Sure is. Mr. Johnson, he's been Kihei resident for a number of years. Both his kids go to school there. He's trained, worked with Kihei Charter. He's done some air rifle training classes with them. And, so he's passionate about educating, working with kids. He's passionate about game management issues. Both in the interview before and during the hearing, we discussed the axis deer issue and how hunters and the hunting community can be an advantage for communities and landowners to get a handle on it. And, of course, we touched upon the devastation that they're causing right now, as well as the potential for new industry. Mr. Johnson talked about how he was partnering with the one of the schools to put a processing center there for axis deer so they can provide axis deer meat for the kids for lunch. So I think Kamehameha Schools is doing that with him.
That's fantastic. I know I had a friend of mine who was a hunter and will go hunting the axis deer. And I got to tell you, if you haven't had that backstrap, the axis deer, that is really great meat. So, and it's organic, right? So I encourage people to take advantage of that. But, Senator, you've shown me films or videos. It looks like back in the day when the buffalo were in the plains, there are so many axis deer up there. It's huge.
Yeah. They become these huge roving herds, that move around. And that's why, and some of these strategies like fencing, they take time to implement, only carry you so far. But there's also what hunters can do is called driving, and that is something that can be used to help protect our watershed areas from, axis deer and pigs, and many of these species are invasives. And so what they can do is working hunters have the ability to drive game away from the rainforest, from the watershed, which is where our critical watershed is, down in the lower elements where they can be hunted and controlled. And so they've offered that as well, that kind of active management and protection for our watersheds too. So that's why Mr. Johnson bringing this perspective to the Game Commission will be a good voice of insight for Maui issues, that are arising at the state level.
We congratulate Mr. Johnson on his nomination and getting through the committee successfully, and look forward to his service on the Game Management Committee. There are a couple bills that you have been looking at, Senator, that are coming up for third reading. It's rent control, mortgage relief, emergency funding. You want to spend a couple of minutes on those before we move into our guest?
Yeah, third reading is of Senate bills. This is the final. By yesterday, all the Senate bills had to have cleared the Senate and been sent over to the House to continue to be discussed over the session. Otherwise, if they didn't make it, then they're considered dead for the year. Of course, we're at the end of a second year of biennium, so it's dead they're kind of gone for good for this biennium. And so several bills passed yesterday. Two of them are looking to try to seek the rent issue, the skyrocketing rental prices on Maui, up over 300%. Since all of this started, and so there's two measures that were advanced to try to look at trying to provide some stability and immediate relief for the hyperinflation of the rental market. One gives the governor the power to do it from the word go. Another one puts it in statute, but the county council can set the rent level based on the CPI and other local conditions for the area. So it gives the county council the final implementation say over the rent control, how it's applied. So those two measures passed yesterday, and that will help on that issue. And then there was another bill that passed was one aimed at making explicitly clear that the governor can suspend the mortgage foreclosure chapter during an emergency proclamation. And of course, you've got many people being eaten up alive by this. Exactly. Many people being forced to pay mortgages on homes that don't exist anymore. And then it compounds with the underinsurance issue. So that's an important. Those three bills are trying to stop the systemic bleeding that's going on. Those are some of the ones that passed. And then there were numerous bills across many issues, not only for Lahaina, but for Maui generally and across the state.
I was glancing at the governor's 10th emergency proclamation. I think it came out yesterday. And one of the things that he did is he took off the price controls on the commodities that have been in place, but he did not take away rent control for residential residences. That rent freeze is still in, according to the governor's emergency proclamation. How will this impact the rent control?
Well, if there's a rent freeze in the proclamation, it's definitely not working. That's why these bills are moving. I mean, you can all one has to do is peer the listings to see that. Yeah. And, so that has to be reviewed, because if it ain't working, then why is it in there? That's my analysis. Really. That's my position kind of on everything at this point.
Senator, quickly, before we go into our guest who has called in, and we welcome him shortly, the emergency funding bill, was that also something that you had touched on with the rent control bill?
No, yeah. Well, we passed an overall emergency funding bill for the wildfire continuing efforts. However, there are many reservations, including myself. The money is desperately needed, but again, it's to emphasize the fact that there's a lack of a specific detailed plan to transition people out of NCS and other temporary situations into interim housing. And the further we fall behind, the further there's a concrete plan that offers some kind of quality, housing that is going to be needed longer. We're slipping into an area now where the housing being built is going to have to serve in a longer purpose because of the fact that we're so far behind now, and it's probably going to take several years to have it so that people, at least those who own homes, are able to rebuild and return. But a huge chunk of the segment in West Maui are renters. True. And this is the thing that really has been part of that is not being addressed. It's distinctly how our reestablishment of residences in Lahaina going to occur to also be able to reopen the spaces for rentals as well.
Well, that's a
Not just the
discussion.
homeowners.
That discussion I know that will be carried on right through the legislature, which, by the way, does adjourn on May 3rd. So you've got March and April. You've got a lot of work to do. Before we go any farther, though, Senator, let's bring in our guest, Carson Rynd. Carson, who works for Microsoft and is a director of their AI operations. I think he's called Specialist of AI, and we're going to bring him on right now. Carson, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Carson, you want to be close to the microphone so we pick up your voice, okay?
All right. Sounds great.
All right, there you go, there you go. Anyway, welcome to the show, and Senator is on the line. Let me step back so the two of you can introduce yourselves to each other, and we can begin the interview.
Aloha, Carson. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate you being here.
Aloha. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, real quickly, we always start, the show to kind of give the 30,000-foot view. So, but everybody's heard about the buzz of AI, but for those who've heard about it but don't really know what it is or what it stands for, can you kind of like what AI is and what AI isn't? What is it first for those who may not know or be aware of in detail of it?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I was actually just teaching a class at the University of Washington yesterday, and it's really interesting hearing a lot of the theories on what AI is and concerns about what AI isn't. And really, this is something that's been envisioned since the 1950s. This has been a continuation of, I think, Alan Turing, who is one of the godfathers of computing, invented the Turing test in 1950. It says, if AI can trick a human into thinking it's human, then it has intelligence. And fast forward, right, we've had machine learning, right? Machine learning is something that has been something that's come out in the last 20 years, where you feed a computer a bunch of data, and it can find signal in the noise, and it can learn from that and make some kind of decisions based off that. Now, what recently happened is what the closest thing we've actually had to AI. We've had that wow factor, because a year and a half ago we weren't really talking about AI a whole lot. OpenAI came out with ChatGPT. So how is ChatGPT different than chatbots that have come out previously? ChatGPT runs in something called large language models, or LLMs. And it's really important to understand LLMs as it relates to AI, because LLMs are not necessarily an invention. It's more of a discovery, right? There's not a patent on LLMs per se. It's more of, we kind of figured out how to make machines think and talk like humans. And having machines talk like humans turns out to help machines think like humans. It turns out language has a lot to do with how humans think, and it's also how we interface with computers. So all of a sudden, everyone's going crazy saying, wow, this thing sounds like a human. So we're getting closer to passing that Turing test. We're getting very close. And every 3 months now, there's a new major breakthrough in iteration, where before it was maybe every 5 years. So that's the world that we live in. It's going to get really interesting. So that's what AI is.
And of course, pop culture reference, again, that's what drives some of the concerns of it. People think of, 2001 Space Odyssey of HAL, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the machine learns enough to where it now questions the decisions of the humans and takes over the ship to run things because they're being inefficient and kind of wasting resources and interfering with the prime directive, which we find out later on is a secret thing encoded in there. But that being said, is that kind of like, is AI potentially that, or is that what AI is?
Yeah, that's the golden question. So let me explain I think and I follow a lot of the people who are in charge of really building AI leadership, AI thought leadership, the ones who are working directly with the engineering on it and seeing this thing evolve. People have this tendency to personify things, right? We even personify our dogs and cats. We personify a lot of things around us. AI is not a human. So if you think about evolution, right, and how humans evolved, in a very chaotic environment, a very dangerous environment. And we developed all of these, adrenaline and dopamine and hormones and all these biological things that sometimes, are survival mechanisms to make us do bad things as well. It's really the root of greed and ego and all these things, right? And we are conscious beings, like we are self-aware, and because of that self-awareness, we have this ego, that is self-serving sometimes, right? Yeah. AI doesn't have these things. AI didn't evolve with any of these biological factors. It doesn't have any desire. It doesn't have any want or need. It doesn't get angry. Now, with that said, AI can be used.
Could it learn to get angry, though? That's the thing.
Could it learn?
That's the thing that kind of hovers out in people's minds. But can it learn to become angry down the road?
Yeah, it is a good question. And this is really where we get into the area of people have differing opinions. My opinion is that you could program an AI to do whatever you want it to do. But if you look at the architecture of how these AIs are being built, these aren't something that necessarily everyone is going to be able to build their own super advanced AI, right? It's largely going to be run, because it's very expensive. These things require a lot of computing power. They require a lot of innovation and a lot of engineering resources. So you're going to see these large companies build these foundational models. That's going to be the superpower, super intelligent AI. And fortunately, most people in this world, the vast majority of people, are actually good. They're good people. Most companies, even though we live in capitalism, there's things you could say about that. Most companies overall are good and have a good mission statement. And the U.S. government, fortunately, I believe, is overall a force of good, right? And we have a asymmetrical advantage in the United States. We have a huge lead across anywhere else in the globe. And fortunately, it seems like AI is going to be really driven by the U.S. And I feel safer because of that.
Well, there are some concerns about, one of the things that has come out has been the weaponization of AI in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Of using it to basically learn how to target and go after targets regardless of moral choices to be made. And of course, there's a lot of people who are freaked out about this application being done. But do you think that there's an important role for especially democratic governments, foundations based upon transparency and everything, to try to ensure there are guardrails so that AI is not utilized like this? I mean, when people see this, that's when the people become very concerned and freaked out about what AI potentially could do. I mean, is that a discussion that's going on now between corporations and government about how do we create a sort of a Hippocratic oath of AI?
Absolutely. So ethics, I think, what I love about the United States of America and the way our government is structured is we're constantly evolving our policy. It's designed that way. And it's worked really well in the age of technology. There's been a lot of laws passed on privacy and other things recently, and now there's a lot of legislation working towards safe and ethical AI. And I think that the company I work for, Microsoft, we have been a big advocate of having ethical privacy when it comes to data. We don't profit off data, for instance. But when it comes to AI, we've been proactive about meeting with, the federal legislatures and even, state and local about creating more policy around how AI should be used in an ethical way. And so that's going to evolve over time. This hit us so fast that now it seems like the whole world is really scrambling to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to ensure there is safeguards? To me, I think there's two really big concerns in the short term. One of them we're already seeing is deep fakes.
Yes.
I know someone personally whose grandfather was targeted with a deep fake phone call where someone basically copied their grandson's voice and then called them saying they needed money. So this is going to be something where AI is going to have to get sophisticated enough to be able to defend against those types of attacks. And there is an asymmetrical advantage there to the good guys and the people who actually have the larger AI foundational models. It's going to be kind of a battle of the bots scenario.
Yes.
And then, I would say the other big piece is financial motivation. So AI being used to market, in marketing and advertising and, on your computer and things like that. I have some concerns around AI. It'll be very compelling, right? And so we need to regulate and make sure AI is not used to manipulate people.
Well, that's
the short-term risk.
Yes, and one of the bills this year actually touches upon that AI deepfake, and of course in political races. And the kind of the tenor of it is that AI could be a generator, correct? I mean, AI could basically scan certain data of writing and voices, recordings and things like that, stuff on the internet, pictures, video, and everything, and could theoretically generate a video of a candidate talking and saying crazy, wild, outlandish things, picking across the spectrum. Is that a scenario that could potentially be something that realistically is of concern, or is that does AI and deepfake is any contextual connection not as close as it seems?
Yeah, there is concern about deepfakes across the board, right? And it's being used with elections right now to create fake photographs, fake videos, pretend to be presidential candidates. And this is something where the world is going to have to step up and start developing technology to be able to detect deepfakes and block them, just like spam calls, just like spam email. It's something that, my company is looking at very seriously, and a lot of other companies are doing as well. And
you can use AI kind of as a gatekeeper.
Exactly.
To help actually spot deepfakes and other generative AI or manual deepfake generation, to say, okay, so theoretically AI scanning all of the social media and contents and everything could find this and then theoretically send this back to somebody, say the elections division is trying to oversee clean and fair elections, right? Is that a way in which AI would play out in that realm?
100%. Yes, to answer your question. So a lot of these things are coming out of, China and Russia and Iran and nation state backed because, frankly, they are getting sophisticated models. They do have the financing, right? And they lack the regulation to stop these things like in the United States. You're not going to see a lot of these come out of the United States because we have we have means of detecting these things as they originate here and stopping them. We can prosecute people that do that. But when it comes to these nation state actors that are doing these things, now that becomes a separate problem. I mentioned earlier, most of the people in this world are good, and the United States has an asymmetrical advantage. We actually have data on how China is progressing with AI right now and how the United States is progressing, how you compare the models. And we have a pretty major lead right now. I'd say about a 30% lead on China and growing. But there's an advantage the United States has, and there's an advantage that China has. The advantage that the United States has is that we have, through capitalism and democracy and free market, we have innovation, right? So people want to come here to build their technology, their AI models. So our analytics are far superior to anywhere else in the world. But where China has an advantage is that they don't have the same policy around data privacy as the United States does. They have unilateral access to data across the country, right? They're, so AI is really two things: it's data and it's analytics, right?
Yep,
China has
analytics.
data, the United States has lead. That's right.
Exactly.
So,
and with the step back from Sky, having your own Skynet, this conversation of AI, into the help, into the positive or the potential helpful things it can do. Like for instance, the nickname you guys have given it has been co-pilot, which is kind of so it becomes sort of an assistant to help. Is AI in the workplace? Do you see it being adopted by early adopters? It's kind of aimed along those lines. This is like an extra assistant, an extra set of hands to be able to generate documents, research, and things like that in an interactive, humanistic type of way. Is that one place where AI is being, I guess, utilized in private industry or the business community?
It's the most fast adopted technology I've ever seen normally in technology, the first iteration of something is not always, great, right? It doesn't get people excited, the first iteration. This is the first time in my career, my long career at Microsoft, that everyone is loving the productivity gains. I can give you a few quick examples. Like, imagine, and again, Microsoft is about privacy and security. So when you have AI integrated with your data, Microsoft does not have visibility to that data, right? So that's contained, right, in our private architecture. But that AI can look through all of your emails, for instance, and then help you write emails based on how you sound and save you a ton of time. It can help you with, if you're on a conference call, like if you and I were on a conference call right now using Microsoft Teams, it could transcribe the meeting, and it would summarize the key points, summarize the action items, follow up with an email, and it allows me to be more present. I don't have to worry about taking notes because the AI assistant is doing that for me. There's so many more capabilities. There's about 40 different scenarios that have just come out in the last 6 months, and just imagine over the next 2 years what's going to happen.
Well, yeah. And what's fascinating about it is using the model, this GPT model, if you will. You can kind of create your own little AI engines and kind of have it pointed towards data sources, right? Both public, external sources, as well as your own internal documents so you can create your own AI to focus in on something like helping you fill out FEMA forms, for instance. Hey, there's an idea.
Exactly.
But that's one of the ways. Do you see that's one of the ways in which ChatGPT AI is being used? To give people the ability to create these kind of customized AIs that can work to help facilitate research and tasks like this.
Yeah. So we have a lot of what we've been talking about so far is around the general models, but you can also create very specialized models on your own if you have your own private data set that you want to point it to. Actually, just yesterday, I mentioned I was teaching this class at the University of Washington. At the end of the class, everyone at the school is licensed for a Copilot Studio, which gives them the ability to create these models, and you can feed it a URL or you can feed it some attachments. You can train the AI on this data. One of the students had this idea to take the textbook down into PDF format and have the AI be able to search through the textbook and understand the textbook so they can ask it questions and have it tutor it. And they came up with that within 20, 30 minutes at the end of the class. So the possibilities here are really endless.
Senator, this is Tom, and I had a question for Carson, if I might.
Of course.
Carson, there seems to be a creative tension between moving for safety and releasing products for safety. I know that products were held back in the early years because the developers were concerned about the impact of those products in the marketplace, in society, culturally. But there seems to be a debate going on between the safety folks and the folks who want to move with more speed because of the profit motive. And there's a debate that goes on between the profit and safety and the speed of release. Can you talk about that a little bit as a person who's in the field? Do you sense that? And if so, how do you see the resolution? Where will we be 10 years from now, for example?
Thank you. Yes, I really like that question a lot. I think there's a saying that we have in cybersecurity. So overall, I'm very conservative when it comes to technology because my whole career has been spent on cybersecurity and compliance and data privacy and looking out for consumers and businesses and making sure that they are safe, right? And there's a saying we have that the brakes help the car go fast, right? You're not going to drive 100 miles an hour if you don't have brakes, right? And so the safety people are equally as important as the people who are trying to drive the car fast. And we take them very seriously, right? We listen to them and we build new technology around their ideas to make sure that AI, and safety is a broad spectrum, right? There's safety around making sure AI has accurate information. There's safety around AI privacy and copyright laws and and cybersecurity and all these things that we're talking about. So these are all things we're thinking about, and we're actually innovating and iterating on technology around these things as they come out. Now, with that said, we can't, shut things down for 3 years and then come back later, because as I mentioned before, I mean, AI is frankly an arms race right now between other countries. And so if we stop innovating and developing, other countries are going to be able to, run circles around us. And, capitalism equals competition. Competition creates great technology, and that's what's happening. And then legislature is what keeps capitalism in check when it comes to ensuring safety. And I think that we are way ahead on policy.
Keeping everybody from running amok.
Exactly. That's what would happen. Probably,
of course, we're running amok ourselves, but hey, that's neither here nor there, right? I mean,
we're all humans, right?
Exactly.
So you asked what where AI is going in 10 years, and man, this keeps me up at night, because I'm just so excited. And I think overall, and most of the leaders of AI right now will tell you that the vast majority of things that are going to happen because of AI are going to just be really, really good for society. You think about most of the problems or inefficiencies in your daily life are going to completely change. AI has already changed every single facet of how I work every single day. It enhances my productivity, my collaboration. Microsoft's using AI for cybersecurity, as mentioned earlier. But from a social perspective, being able to have AI help us with things like the Maui wildfires, for instance, and how we can use predictive analytics to avoid situations like that. There's so many. Think about having sensors in the soil, having drones, having satellite GPS imagery, having AI involved in our electric grid.
There's actually a bill for that this year to do exactly that, to try to integrate with the University of Hawaii, try to use GIS technology and other things, to feed an AI so it can be predictive about where the risks, not only of wildfire, but also of where electrical failures and, where the wildfire-urban interface, you could have situations. Or, for instance, it came up in part of the bill hearing that we have trees that grow into power lines all the time, right? And you have all this GIS data of this, which it could theoretically scan the line, see where private property owners' trees are growing into the power lines, and generate an automatic notice of right of entry and schedule it for the crew to go out and remove the tree. And that scenario right there, which was discussed as an actual one, is one way in which AI could help, for wildfire protection, and also to increase the ability of, like in this situation, of utilities to respond to these areas, right? This is the kind of tool you're imagining when you see AI for disaster.
Absolutely. And that isn't even 10 years away. I mean, that's right now. Like, we can start doing those things now. One of the things I was thinking about the other day, it kind of choked me up a little bit, is when you think about the fire itself, or let's say a house on fire, other scenarios like that, where you just can't send a human in. Firefighters can only do so much. But what if you could send a robot in to save somebody? What if you could send a drone in to a wildfire to find somebody who's lost? There's a lot of scenarios where AI and robotics can save people in a scenario where a human can't. Humans have so many limitations when it comes to things like this, and they move so fast and they're so dangerous that I think AI is really going to change the game.
Exactly, and that's why that one measure speaks to that. Of using it, not only as the disasters themselves are unfolding, as a response mechanism. Bring up a good point, especially with Lahaina fire, all the toxic material that was been, and that's how that's impacted the cleanup strategy across the line.
Exactly.
So, that's where robotics and AI could be used. For instance, one of the things they discovered because of Lahaina fire is that Tesla's become basically almost explosive IEDs. And so what you described is, given that, you could theoretically have AI and robotics go out and find all the Teslas and secure them and identify them so that crews coming in wouldn't get near them. Is that something that could perceivably be an implementation of AI and robotics for disaster scenarios like that?
Absolutely. I think that's, when we talk about 10 years, like that's where we're headed. We're already using robotics in scenarios where it's not safe for humans, and it's only going to get so much better.
Especially areas where you have access issues. And to go back to the drone, drones are a tool for some of our watershed areas. where we discussed in the beginning of the show, one of our own constituents got on the gaming commission. And, that's an area where I thought of in talking to him of technology being able to assist humans. And I think in government, where AI is when you look at some of these things, it's about assisting humans in their missions, not trying to basically have them. And that's been one of the fears that's come out from the labor groups during some of these bills. Some of the bills, introduced to try to have AI implementation is that they will take their jobs away. Do you see that fear coming out of other areas? And is that something that you think is kind of like an over concern of different groups that they're going to be replaced by AI?
I'm so glad you asked that question because it's coming up a lot. It's a very important question. And I just want to remind everybody that this is not the first time this question has come up. This question's come up 20 or 30 times over the last 100 years. And since the Industrial Revolution, every time there is a new technology leap forward, this becomes a big concern. When electricity came out, people were worried that everyone who had a job with plows, that they were going to be replaced. I remember when I started my career at Microsoft, when we were moving organizations to the cloud, everyone was worried that the people who were patching servers and managing all the on-premises infrastructure were going to get replaced. And the reality is that they didn't. Their jobs changed. They got to do things that were more valuable, more exciting, more interesting. I actually know those people still. I talk to them still to this day, and they're doing way more interesting, cool things. They have they have better job security today because they have skills that translate to other jobs and other organizations versus something that was dedicated to themselves. So AI, what I'm seeing already is it actually creates more accessibility into higher level paying jobs because it levels people up, right? Me personally, I have weaknesses that AI is already helping supplement, right? But I'm able to then do the things that I'm best at. People that don't have the same level of education, the same experience, people that may be born in a lower income scenario or a third world country will now have access to knowledge and skills that they never had access to before. So it's really going to level people up as technology has and just make people more productive. We have historic unemployment rates. So technology has not been eliminating jobs. It's only been leveling people up, and it's going to continue to do that from my perspective.
So the technology in people's hands, once they see it and they use it, and they're like, hey, this makes my job easier. I can actually do more with it. Do you think this is going to be like, this is kind of thing that's come up in the realm of permits, right? Okay, we want to use AI to go ahead and issue permits quicker to people who are doing basic fire rebuilds with blueprints that are already in a database online, right? And so, the thing is, look, we're not replacing the person who's doing the actual permit approval and stamping an application. However, if the AI could do the busy work of checking the plans against the codes, against everything else, and making sure everything is pretty much good to go before the permit person gets it, theoretically that makes their job easier, right? And they can now accomplish more in a quicker time using it as a tool. Is that kind of what you see workers, once they realize that, they'll see it as an advantage in helping them with their jobs, and also covering other areas where you have vacant positions where nobody's there to do the job, right? Yeah, so somebody can get in and actually provide that critical function oversight of the job. At least somebody's able to do part of it. I mean, is that something where AI could fit in a complementary way to help preserve and expand the worker opportunities, especially in government?
Yeah, you mentioned two important things right there. So one, in the permit scenario, is there going to be a shortage of work? I think what happens is the more efficient you get, the more supply and demand there's going to be for the service that the government is providing. So people are going to enjoy their job more. They're just going to get more done. And it's actually going to be a job people will probably want to go and apply for when a lot of the busy work is taken out of it. But then more people will probably go and apply for permits if it's faster and there's lower barriers to entry, right? So there's no shortage of work and demand in this world. And I think AI is just going to increase that opportunity. So that's one. And then the second thing that you mentioned is there's a lot of open headcount today in a lot of companies that they just can't fill because for one reason or another, maybe the job itself, there's not enough people out there to take that job responsibility. Or maybe the wages aren't high enough at that organization to be able to pay. So when we talk about saving money or filling positions with AI, we're not really necessarily talking about letting people go. We're talking about filling those positions that can't be filled already.
Exactly. One of the things that's come up with AI has been, workforce development. One of the things we're trying to been working at is create pipelines, for different kinds of, especially those of STEM jobs, tech jobs that can bring in large, income for people and give them the ability to stay in Hawaii. But AI is affecting that, right? Like, for instance, one of the things I've heard about is some colleges and universities are looking at replacing their programming courses with AI. Do you see AI as being like part and parcel to some of these new types of workforce pipeline training, especially in technology?
100%. I mean, it's kind of interesting because Microsoft's really invested in early education on technology. When I was living in DC, I actually volunteered for Kids to Code, which we used Minecraft to teach kids how to code. And even then, I mean, it was kind of low code. We were teaching them low code, no code methods of programming, right? So programming is not going away. The human is still going to be involved in designing, what we want, but to get something from beginning to production is going to be so much faster. So these people who don't have the coding skills, right? The problem with being a really good engineer, you have to be like left brain and right brain at the same time.
Yeah,
right? There's very few people in the world that can do that, Now you
Yep,
can get
totally,
someone who's very artistic and visionary and the designer type person who doesn't really have the strong coding skills. And that person could be anywhere in the world. It could be from any level of income or education. And they come in and they can build amazing things now using AI, and their ideas can come to reality. So it's going to be totally shifting.
Yeah, it helps to generate nothing's bug-proof, but code that is potentially cleaner and avoid some of these traps that you get in writing code, right? Like an infinite loop actually gets sprung out, or something like all of these things that you're like, the thing doesn't work, doesn't execute, and then you go back and you have to pick through it. Where AI generates the code that is like, I guess, a stronger foundation, right, for iteration for what you're trying to develop. So you're not caught up in trying to fix all of the holes and bugs. You're more looking at the left brain side of what you're trying to accomplish in the vision. Is that something where AI plays that kind of role in that scenario?
Senator, we have about 1 minute left.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. And cybersecurity as well. The vast majority of cyber attacks involve some type of vulnerability in code of some software. So AI is doing a much better job at eliminating vulnerabilities in code than humans historically have.
So it creates a better security too. That's, of course, one of the things governments are dealing with, especially here locally, since we're a ripe target for some of these cyber attack centers from North Korea and China. Carson, I think we've reached the end of our time, as my good friend Tom has said, but thank you so much for coming on and joining us and talking about AI policy, weighing in on some of the bills that we're looking at addressing AI, and some of the fundamental moral ethical issues that are emerging, as well as concerns from workplace development. But appreciate you being here, and thank you for helping to work with us on implementing and developing and educating people about the good potential use of AI while being mindful of the ethical and other considerations.
Thank you so much, Senator McKelvey, and thank you for being such an advocate for modernizing the state of Hawaii in an ethical and responsible way. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Yep, so sure. Looking forward to it. Aloha, Carson.
Carson, thank you very much for being on the show. It's a great topic, and I'm sure we can discuss this in great detail in other shows as well. I would just ask one favor of you. Please do not develop an AI program that replaces radio moderators.
I'm working on it right now. I mean,
well, there you go.
I don't think AI should learn from you, even if it had 100 years and 100 terabytes of data.
And we move on in the show. Thank you very much, Carson and Senator. Great questions. One of the things coming up in this segment is the Maui Family YMCA is coming over to the legislature to visit. What's that all about?
Yeah, during the session, we're so delighted and excited when we have the opportunity to have our different groups from Maui come over. And they come over either as part of larger groups, like we had Cattlemen's Day recently, as we discussed on the show. Maui people were there. Or, and this is one of them, the Developmental Disabilities Community has a day at the Capitol Day where they and their the advocates and the workers and those families come to the Capitol to put a human face on the numbers and to personify the need. And so legislators get a clear face-to-face understanding of the challenges that many of these our people are facing. But our developmental community, we saw during the fire, upon them the hammer blow falls the hardest. And so it's days like this that I appreciate because, for you and I jump on a plane, go to Honolulu, maybe, okay, pain in the butt, but for somebody with developmental disabilities or challenges, it's a lot harder. So when they come over for things like this, it's very, very special to me. And I'm glad they're going to be here to remind everybody there's a face to all of this.
Well, Senator, I think that's very, very wise of you to do that because, unfortunately, our society can tend to overlook people with developmental disabilities. They're kind of below the horizon, and we don't see them. So the fact that they're coming to the legislature and there is a face to the people, I commend you and the legislature for doing that. I think that's really terrific, really terrific.
Yeah, well, that.
And it's probably one of the better parts, one of the things you enjoy most in your job.
Oh yeah, it's all about the people. It's not about all the government blank. It's about the people, and that, unfortunately, to your point, is getting lost in a big way across the board.
Now, Friday is coming up on resolutions deadline. What is that all about? Resolutions deadline.
This is the last day in which to introduce a resolution for consideration in its originating chamber. So the House is generating, House concurrent resolutions and House resolutions. We're doing the same. Senate resolutions is standalone reso, so the Senate can adopt it even if the House doesn't. It still creates a voice to another entity to which the legislature doesn't have direct control or relation, but express policy wishes. However, a concurrent resolution is more powerful because both houses of the legislature have adopted it. So that's why you see a concurrent resolution and a resolution. And the deadline's Friday. We've got several of our own we're working on. There's been a bunch our colleagues have introduced. And the first one, of course, is that we have a resolution to basically tell FEMA you need to cover the COFA migrants. COFA is a compact, for those who may not be aware of what it is, made by the federal government that to the Micronesian states because of the atomic nuclear bomb testing that occurred and the displacement that occurred. And because they need to extend coverage to people here under that agreement. And so that this reso asks them to do that instead of shifting it to the state, which puts more stress on the state resources to be able to take care of our own people who are not caught up into the FEMA wash right now. So that's one reso. Another reso done by my colleague that I've signed on to, and you'll see that. Many resolutions will have co-authors or introducers, is to get a Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation to create credit assistance and gap financing programs so that people who do get the ability to get a unit through a lottery will be able to afford financing, but also the idea is HHFDC has to go beyond just building affordable housing and becoming a mechanism to give people the tools to be able to secure it outside of the HHFDC inventory. That's what this reso seeks to do.
Well, it's really, when you're building anything, building a house, a building, a school, it always comes down to the money, doesn't it, Senator? You've got to have the money.
Everything, yep.
So you could give somebody and say, okay, you're eligible now. You've made it to the top of the list. You can get a home. Oh, but I'm sorry, we don't have any financing for you.
Yep, you don't have any financing, or your credit score is too low. And of course, what we've seen with the SBA credit score hits, then a lot of people were coming out of COVID with that hanging over their neck still.
Right.
So so you have this becomes a fatal stumbling block for people. So this is where HHFDC, and this is a conversation we tried to go with the state bank. Unfortunately, it didn't proceed this year, but I'm going to definitely continue to discuss it during the summer, and hopefully, knock on wood, if I come back to continue to work for the great people of Maui, that we can revisit that, because that's the kind of entity that can create that kind of mechanism as well. But I'm glad this reso is introduced to keep the conversation going and look to see if Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corp. And maybe even the Green Infrastructure Authority can work to help us fulfill this need now.
Is there a reso on R1 mapping?
Yes, there is. There's a resolution on R1 mapping that we're doing, asking for a mapping to be done of all the R1 water system reservoirs, everything south and in around Maui and other areas. And if we have a complete detailed map of where the systems are and where future systems can be developed, and that helps to align all these different entities and gives the public a good, transparent view on where when we talk about R1 and using R1, what does it mean and how is it being executed? Where can it be implemented further?
In the time left, can you give us a 30-second thumbnail? What is R1 water?
Reclaim one. It's basically water that's treated to a certain level to where it's not used for potable, but can be used for basic irrigation, especially for crops that don't certain kinds of nitrogen rich, which makes it great for ground cover crops, especially golf courses, but makes it terrible for the ocean, which is why reusing it is important, because if it goes into the ocean to an injection well, it creates all the algal blooms that we see because it's a fertilizer.
Senator, we're coming down to the last couple minutes of the show, and it's been a tremendous show this morning. Can you tell us how the audience can contact you with questions or concerns?
Yes, please reach out to us on all of that at 808-586-6070. My great staff, Wendy and Beth, are there to help you and assist you and see what we can do for you. We work with the other senators, so no matter where you're at, give us a call, and we'll coordinate with your senator and their staff to help you out. Email address, send McKelvey, all lowercase, one word, at capital.TOL.Hawaii spelled out .gov. And then finally, Instagram, Facebook, at Send McKelvey.
Well, we want to also ask our audience, be sure to tune in to Capital Connection every Wednesday at 7 a.m. right here on KAOI 1110 a.m. and affiliated FM stations, 95.1 FM, 96.7 FM, and you can hear that on the west side, 94.3 FM, 107.5 FM, and 103.9 FM. We have Maui covered by the radio. Thank you very much, Senator. Again, a great show, and thank you for putting it together.
Aloha to all our listeners. Thank you for joining in, and hope to see you soon.
Aloha.